Hi friends, it's Miss Nicole again, and we've finally reached week 4 of Cooking Matters for Kids. And this week we're doing carrot pineapple muffins. But before we begin our baking, I want to give you some basic baking tips, and I'll also go over the ingredients and the tools we're using for this recipe today. For tools, we are using a muffin tin, measuring cups, measuring spoons, some mixing bowls, a grater, a spatula, a spoon, and something to level out our measuring. So I'm just using a knife. You could use a butter knife, whatever you have. For ingredients, we have whole wheat flour and white flour, baking soda, cinnamon, pumpkin pie spice, a can of crushed pineapple, carrot, brown sugar, oil, and vinegar. There are 2 important things to remember when baking. Number 1 is that we always need to be exact. So we need to measure things very precisely. And 2 is that there's a special order that we mix things in. So I'll start with measurements. When we measure, we want to make sure that our measurements are exact. Baking is sort of like a science experiment. So if you don't add the correct amount of ingredients, sometimes your experiment doesn't come out right. So when you start out with muffins that are small like this, and they come out of the oven like this, and they've risen, that's because of chemistry and a certain reaction that's happened. So in order to make that reaction correct, we need to measure precisely. So if I scoop a half cup of flour, and I scoop it like this, is that truly a half cup? No, that is way more than a half cup. So it's important that we level it. So using my level, it can be a knife or the side of a spoon, whatever you have, just gently scrape off the top until you have a flat surface that fills the cup but doesn't overflow, just like this. The same thing is true of smaller ingredients. Something like baking soda. We might not be using that much, so I'm going to show you with a half teaspoon. Once again, if I measure this much, is that truly a half teaspoon? No, that's way more than a half teaspoon. I have to level it. I can just do that right in the box here, and there you can see it's nice and flat. Our second rule about baking is that we need to add our ingredients in a specific order. And the way that you add ingredients and combine in baking is that first you mix all of your wet ingredients, and in a separate bowl you mix all of your dry ingredients, and then you combine them. So looking at our ingredients here, which ones do you think are wet ingredients? Definitely the oil, the pineapple. These are wet foods. The carrot is also a wet food because it is made up of mostly water. That leaves the rest of these as dry ingredients. So your flour, your spices, your sugar. All right, now that we know the basics of baking, we're going to get started.